is some gripping news that you've just been served up with. I think you might have some good questions for the whistle stop tonight, yes? A lot going on at Boys State. Those videos were great. Let's give it up for the staff that does that for us every night. And as much as I hate to encourage them, how about we give it up for Gardner and Jake there in the back? All right, I have one announcement for you. We are going to have a Boys State talent show on Thursday evening. But the only way to make that work is for those of you with talent to sign up. More information will be coming, but we're looking for musical acts. We're looking for stand-up. We're looking for stupid human tricks. If you think it will be entertaining, we want to see what you've got. So be looking for the information on where to try out and help entertain one another on Thursday night because it's a great evening. Now then, on to the main event. We are very fortunate to have with us tonight a great American. Former Senator Rick Brinkley is a much sought-after speaker. Over the past 35 years, he has spoken to groups big and small throughout the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean. He has shared the stage with some notable figures such as Rush Limbaugh, diplomats, members of the Gandhi family, and Olympic athletes. Today, he spends much of his time speaking to 12-Step and other groups, helping those in recovery. He's a former national Emmy-nominated television producer, pastor, and state senator here in Oklahoma. He also has had some interactions with the Miss America pageant, if I remember correctly. Maybe you can ask something about that. He wasn't in it. I mean, I think that goes without saying, but no. Oh, I'm kidding.
It was a long time ago.
Most significantly to me, when I was first elected to the Oklahoma Senate, Rick took me under his wing, became a friend and mentor, and was an invaluable asset in helping me navigate my first year in the upper chamber. He is currently a communications consultant focusing on public speaking, media interviews, and corporate and political debate preparation for business and political leaders, athletes, celebrities, and companies. He also works as a fill-in host for the political radio show The Ride with Chad Alexander on KOKC Radio in Oklahoma City. However, his most significant accomplishments are his son John and his grandson Pi. While Rick is not a perfect person, and none of us are, Senator Brinkley was a remarkable lawmaker. He was politically savvy, but he was also a statesman. He has friends in all branches, both sides of the aisle, and was constantly on the inside of the circle as any significant decision was being made in the Capitol. He could disagree with other members and yet maintain civility and see the intrinsic humanity behind every opposing viewpoint. Senator Brinkley has a fascinating story and a poignant message for you tonight, and we are quite fortunate to have him here with us this evening. Gentlemen, let's please give a big Boys State welcome to Senator Rick Brinkley.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. First of all, I have to tell you that I'm probably more excited to be here than you are. I grew up not very far from here. I'm probably going to end up, I'm already going to mess up first thing out of my mouth. Are you guys juniors who just finished up going to be seniors? Okay. All right. I graduated from Collinsville High School, not very far from here, in 1979. Some of you may already have class mottos. Ours was among the worst on the planet. I graduated from high school in 1979. Our class motto was, "We are sexy, we are divine, we are the class of 79. You'll take it. So, from here on, everything's up. I had a chance to know, I would still call him Senator Brooks, but Deputy Undersecretary Brooks, when we were together in the Senate. And what I remember most about him, among other things, other than he was a very good friend, he was very good at what he did, he was very intelligent, he knew how to understand the bigger issues of what we were there to actually do, is that I was coming from the 5th floor back staircase down to the 4th floor to the chamber. I was headed to the chamber, and Senator Brooks was coming up from having been in the chamber, and as we passed each other, I looked at him, and he looked so distraught. his face was just miserable. And I'm looking, and I grab his arm, and I go, "Are you okay?" And he says, "My tummy hurts." And I said, "You went to the war college. Do not ever say my tummy hurts again as long as you live." So that's been my running joke with him. How's your tummy? And then, of course, Dr. Test, I knew because he was on Senate staff. Now, Dr. Test, where are you? Are you in the back? I see you. Is that Dr. Test would set up at the front desk, and so on this particular day, I was presiding over the state Senate. He's trying to figure out where this story is going. Do you remember it yet? Yes, he's already nodding his head. And so I had gotten back to my office and realized I left this pen on the desk of the presiding officer's desk where you have the gavel and those kinds of things. So I went back down to get it, and I came back into the chamber through a back door, and I just really it wasn't intentional. I just kind of quietly slipped in to grab the pen and to go, but Dr. Test and several of the other guys who were working that desk were just having a guys' conversation. And one of the guys, out of the blue, just said, and I'm sure he was obviously just joking, out of the blue, just suddenly says, "I'm thinking about making a sex tape." And I said, No. Do not apply that. He goes, "I'm thinking about making a sex tape." And the others, including Dr. Test, were like, "What?" Like this. And then they hear my voice from the back because they didn't know I was there. And I go, "There has to be someone in it with you, right?" And at that point, all I remember is Dr. Test's face doing this. And we've never let Dr. Test forget that. And somewhere is Senator Ivester. Where are you? He's already skipping out. You actually are in the balcony where you told me you were going to be. I didn't believe you. And Senator Ivester, I think there's a son down here. We were in the Republican Party. He's in the Democrat Party. He and I actually worked on a couple of things, or one thing in particular that I'm going to talk about tonight. And the one thing that we live in a world today that says that depending upon which party you are in, Republicans are good, Democrats are bad, or Democrats are good and Republicans are bad. And there's bad in both. There's really bad in both. But the reality is that the people who are actually doing the work, you very rarely ever hear their names because their heads are down, they're doing the work they're supposed to be doing, and we end up living with it. Now, what happened was I grew up in a very small town. When I was a kid, Collinsville was 2,500 people. And I knew about politics. The state representative for our district was a lawyer in our town, but no one really paid much attention to what was going on to it. But I grew up with this really, really, really small class. There was 128 in my graduating class. We still all know each other. But what happened was I grew up in a very common family, a very ordinary family from a very small town in Oklahoma. The best example I have for you, I was the first person on either side no one in my family had ever graduated graduated college. And so I was the first person on either side of my family to go to college. I was the first college dropout in my family. I was working in television, ended up going to Baltimore, New York. But when I was in Baltimore, I was producing the opening day coverage for the Baltimore Orioles. And that was a very long day. We were in a trailer for 24 hours getting everything we needed. And I was going to go home, and I just wanted to lay on the couch and not answer the phone. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have caller ID. So I just unplugged and was like, I got to sleep for like a good 48 hours. But the phone kept ringing. And finally, I picked up the phone, and it was my sister. And she was crying, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. And she just kept saying, "I almost killed him. I almost killed him. I almost killed him." I'm like, "Rhonda, what happened?" Well, what I was finally able to make out of that story is that her fiance, who later became my brother-in-law, had bought his father a riding lawnmower, but it needed to have some work done on it. And he said, "Will you drive over here? Let me tie this," I can't even do it without laughing. "Let me tie this riding lawnmower to the back of your car, and will you pull me to the service station?" I said, "What happened?" She goes, "No one didn't tell me I couldn't do it at 40 miles an hour. You pulled a man on a riding lawnmower at 40 miles an hour? I said, "What happened?" She goes, "I came to a stop sign." You pulled a man on a riding lawnmower at 40 miles an hour and you stopped? I said, what happened? And she goes, he passed me. By the grace of God, that rope broke, and my brother-in-law got flung through an intersection at 40 miles an hour on a riding lawnmower. And it didn't stop for like blocks. It just kept going. And so, but every time you would bring it up to her, she would always just say, I could have killed him. I could have killed him. And my parents, my father's deceased. My mom still lives in the same house they had before I was in first grade. Really tiny kitchen. We having family over. We go in there, we fill up our plates, we go to the table. And if I would do something, and at some point my sister would say, well, that's stupid. And I would go, riding a lawnmower. And she would just go, I could have killed him. But you didn't. And things happen in our lives that we react to. And what could have happened, but it didn't. Stop being overwhelmed. You guys are about to go through one of my side things that I do is work with people your age on those who want to go to Ivy League schools, working with them on essays and interviews, getting ready for college. And I have never seen such stressed out human beings in my entire life. I actually had a student this year who was accepted to 14 Ivy League and prestigious schools, and there was one who denied him acceptance. He could not get over the one no despite the 14 yeses, because the amount of stress that he put on himself was overwhelming. And so I just want to tell you, as you're going into this senior year, number one, you need to relax. 365 days from now, it's all going to be over. And that hits hard for some of you. And what you need to realize is that you better enjoy every second of it. I'm not talking about the partying part of enjoying it. I'm talking about enjoying it and understanding what you have and what you have accomplished. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But you guys here at Boys State. And the one thing we're going to talk about that I still keep calling you Senator Brooks, I'm sorry. Senator Brooks brought up was the ability to work together with others. Now, some of you came to Boys State already planning before you ever got here that you were going to run for office for no other reason that you wanted to make sure that it was on your resume to get to college. You really didn't care if you did anything. You just wanted it on your resume. Those are not the kind of people that we need in elected office. Now, before anyone thinks I'm talking about anyone you know, I don't know any of you. So I'm not talking about any of you. What I am saying is the part that you need to understand about what you're doing in your communities, in your cities, as you were running for office is you're trying to find one major objective, and that is to leave your community or your state or your nation better than the way in which you found it. If you are there to serve yourself, nothing will ever get done. What happens is that you have to just simply do the next right thing. There are plenty of people in office who never met a press release they didn't like, who will always show up for the photo op, but will absolutely get absolutely nothing done the entire 12 years that they are in the state legislature. They didn't go there to do anything. They came there to be well known in their communities and to get their pictures taken. We are at a point in our nation where we are so divided, as we see everywhere we go, that we are reliant upon you. The group of adults leading this nation right now have taken it to where it is. We get better by, even when I got elected in 2010, everyone had, if you were in the left, you had to prove that you were more liberal than the other guy who was running. And if you are on the right, you had to prove that you are more conservative than anybody else. And eventually, people keep walking that out on either side. The funny thing, believe it or not, is they end up looping all the way around, that we would be sitting on the floor, the vote would be 46-2. The only two no votes were the most liberal and the most conservative people in the room. The two people who obviously could not agree on anything were the only two who agreed on that they did not like that bill. when you are looking to where you are, some of you are going to run for office. I can tell you that right now. Some of you are planning to run for office. Some of you are preparing. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do. And I applaud that. When I say if you came here with the sole desire of being elected to get it on your resume and nothing else, that's the problem. What we're saying here is if you're not, we don't want you to be that guy who's looking for the photo op and the press release. We want you to be the guy or the woman, there's no women here, but the guy who is destined to leave this place better than the way in which they found it. Now, what happens is that the people who end up getting there, we will live. Now, I think that probably most of you are very engaged. You probably know your state senator's name or your state representative's name, maybe. But if I ask you to name all 48 members of the Oklahoma State Senate, you would have no idea. If I asked you to name the 101 members of the Oklahoma House, you wouldn't have any idea. But the reality is, even though you do not know who they are, you are going to live with every decision that they make. And sometimes those decisions are for the betterment of the whole, and sometimes those decisions are because of issues that they just wanted to deal with themselves. Dr. Test and Senator Brooks and I have a mutual friend, conservative. And if he was here, he would probably be nodding his head knowing I'm talking about him. I'm not talking about him behind his back. I've talked to him about it in front of his face. Is that he filed a bill. These are actual bills. He filed a bill to ban paper straws from the party that does not like government regulation. And I said, why are you filing a bill on paper straws? If you're running a hipster coffee shop and your customers want paper straws, they should be able to get paper straws. He goes, I don't like paper straws. Don't use one. This is not rocket science. You don't have to ban the entire state because you don't like a straw. The other one that I will never forget, and this was actually when I was in high school and I knew this legislator, he had gone to one of the old-fashioned car washes where you use the wand to wash your car down. He had, the time had ran out. So, being the highly intelligent man that he is, he put the wand on the hood of his car and turned around and went back and put money in the machine. The wand started blasting water at full speed, and it was swinging all over the place. It shattered his windshield. It hit him in the face a couple of times, blacked both eyes. And he wanted to run a bill to regulate car washes. And, you're like, why? Well, I got 2 black eyes, and it shattered my windshield. You left a wand on top of the car with a high-pressure hose and turned it on and walked away. Why run a bill? Why not just not be stupid? Okay? Then the other one, which comes from Senator Ivester's side of the aisle, was one of my favorites. It was an amendment on a bill. Senator Ivester and his people came to our people and said, we want you to roll over it because of the dynamics of caucus stuff. We don't want it either, but we can't be the people to do it. You guys do it, and we'll support you because it's going to be embarrassing for all of us. Was an amendment on a bill that said that if a man and woman are engaged in a consensual duet and one of them and the woman becomes pregnant, she was actively involved in this, and she does not wish to be pregnant, the man must pay a $25,000 fine and get a vasectomy. That is about as much government overreach as you can possibly get, okay? Because if that were the case, that if married couples accidentally was not expecting on having a child, ends up with one, and the men had to get vasectomies, 90 of you would not be here today. Okay? So those are actual bills. Those are actual examples of people who were not there to legislate to make the planet better. It was to address issues that they wanted to fight for themselves. Now, some of you are trying to wrap your head around some of the things that I have told you, but there is craziness whether you are on the left or on the right. There's days where there are Republicans who will make comments that the rest of the Republicans have like going, man, what's he doing now? And there's the same thing on the left. But nobody knows about those people because right now we listen to the loudest voices in the room. We do not listen to the smartest voices in the room. That's why we need you. You are here because there is something inside of you that drives you. You didn't show up here because you were lazy. You didn't show up here because you didn't care. You showed up here because there is something inside of you right now at your age that you know that there is something out there that you have the capability of doing. This is our republic. And I can't tell you that the adults have done the best job possible in leading where we are today. At some point, the baton is going to be passed to you, and it's coming very quickly. How many of you are 18? Any of you? A few? Oh, okay. I'm so old, it sounds like a joke. I'm so old that I was in elementary school when the nation was making a decision on whether or not 18-year-olds could vote. I still remember sitting at my grandma's table, and she and my mom were in a conversation, and they were talking about whether or not 18-year-olds should have the right to vote. And my mom said, absolutely not. They're too young. They're too immature. They don't know what it's about. They should not be voting for the President of the United States. And I still remember this day, my grandmother, who I didn't expect to say this, said this is during the time at Vietnam. And my grandmother said, if they're old enough to go to Vietnam and to lay down their lives for our country, they are old enough to decide who the commander-in-chief will be. So you have a responsibility. You are of age that you could lay down your life for our nation, and you have a right to vote. You have to make sure that you are engaged in the system that will is governing you, because if you don't, there's a line in politics that says, if you do not have a seat at the table, you are on the menu. All right? If you do not have a seat at the table, decisions will be made that affect your life, and you will never even know they take place. That's why it is about engagement, of being aware of what's going on, and not just listening to the loudest voices, but listening to the smartest voices. You will reserve the right to be able to change your mind. That's one of the things that a lot of people that I work with lack the ability to do. Is I have had this belief for so long that even though I have been given better information and facts that have changed, I still don't believe I can change my mind. That's the definition of a 3-year-old. Be an adult. One of the things, one of my favorite stories, and poor Dr. Tess and poor Senator Brooks have heard what we call pie stories. That's my grandson's nickname. His real name is Christian. We've called him Pie since he was born. He was in kindergarten. He was 5 years old. I went in to pick him up. He'd been in kindergarten for about 3 days. And he was really cute, had a little backpack, and I was walking out behind him. And I just said, how'd school go today? And he stopped, and he turned, and he looked at me, and he goes, I got better things to do than to sit here all day. He's 5 years old. I'm like, oh, boy, this is not going to go well. And as he walks a couple more steps, and he turns around, he goes, they should do away with all schools and all jobs. And I say, well, if they do away with all schools, we'll all be dumb. Why would you want to be dumb? And he didn't skip a beat. He looked at me and he goes, if we're all dumb, we don't know we're dumb. And I was like, dang. And that is the best exemplification of what we see today in politics. If you are only listening to the voices that repeat what you already want to hear, you don't know you're dumb. Because you're hearing the same information over and over and over again. You've got to hear voices that you do not agree with right now. One of the things that people make this huge mistake in politics is they either listen to Fox News all the time, or they listen to MSNBC all the time, or CNN all the time. If you are a Fox viewer, I know you're going to have a heart attack. You better flip it over to MSNBC every once in a while for no other reason than to find out what they're saying. The same thing on the reverse. Senator Greg Treat is the pro tem of the Oklahoma State Senate. We were together with a group one night, and he's a conservative, and there was a liberal, and they were arguing over facts of what was happening in the United States. The facts, not opinion, the facts did not agree. They pulled out both of their phones, they set them side by side, they pull up their news feeds. Their news feeds are giving them the exact opposite information from one another because the algorithms on social media know what you watch, know what you like to hear, and they reinforce that over and over and over again because they want you to keep listening to what they already know you have because that's where they make their money. If you don't make a conscious choice to hear another voice, you will not be able to hear the other side of the story. The other pie story, I'm going to share two pie stories, one right now and one later. Pie was 6 years old. He was still 5. He was in kindergarten still. And I said something about s'mores. He said, I've never had a s'more. I said, how in the world have you never had a s'more? You're 5 years old. He goes, I've never had a s'more. I said, your parents are going to hell. We've got to fix this. And so I go to the grocery store and I buy all the stuff to make s'mores. I set it in the cabinet and I said, we're going to wait till it snows because s'mores are best when it's snowing outside. It was snowing. I went and picked him up from school early, brought him home. There had just been a downpour of snow running from the car. He was sopping wet. I said, go take your clothes off, throw them in the dryer. He's got his little boxers on. I set him up on the table. We put them all together. I put him in the oven, and I said, go get a blanket, wrap up on the couch, turn on SpongeBob. And he said, can I have the marshmallows? I said, sure. So he takes the marshmallows. And he goes back, and he's sitting on the couch. They're done. I walk in with the tray, and I set him down, and he looks up at him, and he goes, they look gross. And I'm like, look, just eat one. I don't care. And so he takes a bite, and he does this. He goes, I never dreamed they could be so good. And then he put it up on the tray and went back to watching SpongeBob and eating the marshmallows. I said, wait a minute. You just said that you've never had it better than, you've never dreamed it could be this good. You've never had anything any better. Why did you put this back on the plate? And his head turned so slow that the hair on my arm stood up. And this 5-year-old looked at me and he goes, everybody does that. I said, everybody does what? He said, everybody's had it better than they ever dreamed it could be. They just go back to what they're used to. And I'm used to the marshmallows. So this is a 5-year-old. Now what happens is he ends up saying to me, and it dawned on me in that moment, there is going to be moments in your life that were ever better than you ever dreamed they could be. But if you slide back into what you were used to, it doesn't matter how great that moment lasts, it could have lasted longer. And right now, our nation is and I'm not anti-America. I'm not saying that life is horrible. I'm just saying I lived in a time when it was better than I ever dreamed it could be. And as it slides back, your generation could be very used to the way it is because that is your base of knowledge. Don't accept what is fed to you, regardless of your party. Just simply make it better. Now, one of the things I'm going to say here real quick, and I said I was going to only tell one more pie story. I'm going to tell another one right now. And this is for you guys. You guys are seniors. You guys are at a position where things can go south pretty quickly between now and the time you graduate college. My Pi would spend the night with me. He'd go, Peepaw, can I sleep with you? And I'd say, sure. So he'd get in bed with me. He would talk my leg off. We'd finally go to bed. So the lights were out. I was in a zone. I was on my way out. And all of a sudden, the covers come flying up out of the bed. He goes, Peepaw. I go, what? He goes, why did Adam and Eve follow God? Follow the snake and not God? And I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. I'm tired. And so I give him this beautiful dissertation on free will. Adam and Eve had choices to make. They had to live with the consequences of their actions. We have to make our decisions. We have to live with the consequences of our actions. God gave us free will. And he's looking at me like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And he's just looking at me like, I go, what? He goes, I would have just chopped down the tree. What do you mean you would have chopped down the tree? And he said, in 5-year-old language, he said, I would have removed the temptation. I don't understand what the drama was about. And some of you are going to come up at some point in the next few years of a decision you're going to have to make, and you realize that you need to chop down a few trees. That you've got free will, but as long as a temptation remains in front of you, you're going to be in trouble. The one thing I always talk about groups like this, and I'm going to speed this up because I know we've got started late, is that you're what I call the special people. Special people are people who have known for a very long time that there is something inside of them. And they don't know what it is exactly, but they know that there is something bigger out there for them. Some of you may have looked around your third grade class and gone, yeah, I'm better than this. Or some of you may have looked around your family and go, I'm not going to be like that. Or some of you just saw something on TV and you went, I want that. I want to be that, whatever that is. But the problem with being a special person is that while you know you have the ability to do it, while you know you can do it and while you know that it is what you were supposed to be doing, there's that other side of you that says, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do that. And you second guess yourself every step of the way. Then somebody tells you can't do it, and then you go, really? Watch this. And all of a sudden you do it just to prove somebody else wrong. And when you do that, sometimes you're doing stuff you really don't want to do anyway, but because they told you you probably wouldn't be good at it, you have to prove that you can. Then you get entangled in all of this stuff trying to get this thing accomplished, and you're like, why am I doing this? I didn't want to do it to begin with. And you end up riding this roller coaster of emotions within yourself. And what will happen is, and I was a minister for 10 years for like 5 seconds. I'm going to sound like a minister. Whether or not you call it Satan, whether or not you call it the darkness, whether or not you call it karma, whether or not you call it the universe, whatever you call it in the world in which you live. In my life, there will be nothing that will not convince me that God does not exist. It may not be able to convince you that you're not worthy, whatever that line is for you. But what it will do is convince me that I am not worthy. And the second you believe that you are not worthy to achieve what has been inside of you, for many of you since you were a small child, the darkness wins. Because you did not live up to what you had the capacity to do in this world. And you were created for a purpose. And there was a really good friend of mine who was the one who convinced me to run for office. People had approached me, and I was having breakfast with him, and I said, I don't want to do it. Because my grandson's 12, we're doing soccer, we're going everywhere, it's the best time of my life. He goes, but you would be good at it. And I said, but I don't want to do it. He goes, but you would be good at it. You have to do what you're good at, because that's the talents that you were given. And he goes, and he's very funny, he goes, my daughter loves singing, and she wants to be a singer. My daughter sucks at what she loves. She will never be good at that, and she will never be successful at it. But if you do what you're good at, she will be able to spend whatever money she wants to be able to learn how to sing, to do what she loves. But when you find out what you're good at it for a reason. Now, I go through all of that pontificating to ultimately loop right back around to this. But, and Senator Brooks leaned toward it when he said he was not perfect. Because what happened was I lost control of my life. I had to find some way to escape. I always had a smile on my face. I shook hands. I did everything I was supposed to do. But I just wanted to be left alone. And I found a place that allowed me to escape. And that led to an addiction that allowed to a 3-year prison sentence. I spent 3 years in prison. I spent 3 more years on supervised release where I could not even leave the section of the state that I lived in without permission. And people say, well, he went to prison because of an addiction, which is true. But more importantly, I had an addiction because I lost control of my life. When I said to you, you are the special people, that means you are the ones who are going to be under the greatest pressure. You are going to be the ones who are going to be making the tough decisions. You are the ones who are going to spend time in your head, and when people ask you what is going on, what wrong, you're going to say, nothing. I'm fine. So while I can stand here and pontificate to you about how to do the right things and be the right things, the reality was I didn't always do that. And I paid a high price for it. I don't want anyone else to ever pay the price that I paid. But the thing about it was, on the outside, it wasn't being fake or phony. Just no one knew about my addiction. I compartmentalized my life. I stood at the Capitol. I did my job. I was good at what I did. I worked with people. I was never that guy in front of anybody. My family didn't even know until the story broke. But of all the things that I did as a senator, one of the things that you will do bills and you will do things that change people's lives and they'll never know your name, and you will work with constituents. Senator Ivester and I worked on a bill that named parts of Highway 169, just a few miles from here, that has signs honoring 4 soldiers from this area that died in Afghanistan. And the point of that is that even though we did that 10 years ago, 11 years ago, is that people are still driving with those signs, and there's a kid who says, "Mommy, who is Christopher Horton?" And she goes, "I don't know." And she goes, "Look him up on your phone." And she reads about a soldier who gave the full measure for the nation in which we live. It's an insignificant bill as far as easy as it is to get done. It's an unbelievably significant bill and what it teaches people who just go past that sign all the time. But Christopher Horton's wife, Jane, and I had, before Christopher was killed in action, she and I had been working together on projects for soldiers' families. And here we are, Memorial Day. And what happened was, in the midst of working this, 2 weeks later, I got the call that he had been killed in action. And things began to move rapidly. His body was brought back. He was brought back to Tulsa for what is called the dignified transfer, where the plane arrives. There are fountains of water showing over the plane. She and I were to walk out onto the, her family was not there, so she asked me to go with her, and we walked out on the tarmac, and the TV crews were over to the side, and we walked up to the casket as it was being lowered, and she put her hands on there, and I prayed, and I reached over, and I looked at her, and she raised her head, and she said, "I just have to make sure his sacrifice was worth it." And she went through the grief period. She ended up being special assistant. Right now, she's special assistant to Congress on issues related to military families. She's worked in the Afghani embassy. She went back to Afghanistan to see the place where her husband was killed in action. So while I talk about politics, the reality is it is our responsibility to make sure his sacrifice was worth it. You need to understand, I happen to be here on Memorial Day weekend. There is no better night than to remember that there were people who literally died for you to have a right to vote. There are people who literally died so you could have the Bill of Rights, so you could have the Constitution, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your wealth. So I told you that our generation has got to pass the baton. And the most important part of a relay race is not how fast each runner runs. The most important part of a relay race is the moment that the baton is passed to the next runner. Because if the baton is dropped, the race is over. Be prepared to accept the baton. Because Christopher Horton's wife just wants to make sure that you guys know her husband died for you to have a chance to do that. You're special people. You have the ability to change the world that you live in if you find the confidence to believe in yourself and the knowledge that you know that you can do it. And you've got a country waiting for you to get it done because we are relying on you. Thank you guys very, very much. Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right. See, I told you. Fantastic guy, huh? All right. Well, Senator Brinkley, if you would come hither. We have a little something for you on behalf of a grateful Boy State. This is the official Boy State shirt, as you can see out there, that we would like to bestow upon you.
Awesome.
And, of course, the hat. Gets a little sunny out there.
Well, and I've got plenty of places to get sunburned, so the hat will be very much appreciated. Thank you.
And for me personally, for doing an excellent presentation, this is the Director's Coin presented for excellence that I would like you to take and display proudly.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much.
much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it. I hope you have some stuff to unpack there in your cities tonight. In the meantime, it is time to get to know your candidates for governor and lieutenant governor just a little bit better before that final voting. So, counselors, please take charge of your cities, and let's get to our whistle-stop locations. Good night, all.